I'm on top of the church. What the fuck you want?
Why? I said wake up, motherfucker.
Heyo, Ian here from Sleep Deprivation, back with another World of Warcraft discussion, and today we're going to be talking about melee DPS, more specifically, the best melee DPS, that being rogues. Now, a lot of people can fight arguments and say words that they fucking suck at, like I do. A lot of people can make arguments for why their favorite class or whatever it is the best melee DPS, but that's the problem, is that is arguments. I am not here to argue. I am here to tell you with facts that without a doubt, rogues are the best melee DPS in the game. No ifs, ands, or buts, no opinions, just facts. So yes, I main a rogue. Yes, I love melee DPS overall, but this has nothing to do with my opinion and everything to do with what rogues bring to the table over other classes. Now, I want to strictly say this is purely PvE. This has nothing to do with PvP whatsoever because, first of all, PvE, PvP, very different. Secondly, I don't know shit about PvP right now, so that'd be fucking retarded if I decided to do that. So with rogues being the best melee DPS, how do I justify that? Well, a lot of people, when they're judging melee DPS, will judge them by either how much damage they do single target, how much damage they do AoE, and mobility. And those are good things to judge melee DPS on, except rogues aren't really the best at any of those, actually. If you look at simulations for single target DPS, rogues are average at best. If you look at simulations for AoE DPS, once again, rogues are average at best. And if you look at mobility, well, warriors, demon hunters, and monks are all quite a bit more mobile than rogues are. Yeah, they're not as, slow and immobile as, say, Death Knights or Ret Paladins, but they're once again kind of sitting in the middle. So that raises the question, once again, why are rogues the best melee DPS if they're average at all three major categories? Well, I could give you the argument of, hey, just because they simulate low does not mean that they end up being low overall. For example, in my raid group, I am often the top DPS or close to the top DPS, despite the fact that I don't sim as high on DPS as other people in my raid group. But once again, that is an argument. That is subject to things like player skill, situations of the fight, and situations of the raid group. So I'm not going to use that as an argument. My facts that I'm going to be dealing with have everything to do with the rogue abilities, the intangibles, the things that give rogues an advantage over other melee DPS through means other than just damage and mobility. And these can be primarily categorized into utility and survivability. Now, the first ability I want to talk about is lockpicking. And you may be thinking, lockpicking, that seems like an odd ability to pick to give you an advantage as a DPS. And you'd be right, except for the fact that there is a little known dungeon of Tol Dagor that if you have lockpicking, it allows you to bypass certain areas and unlock all the jail cells before the second boss, making it easier. So having a rogue makes it a lot easier to make the dungeon on time and easier on the second boss. And yes, technically the same type of effect can be achieved with some form of profession creating keys, but rogues have an advantage over other melee DPS in the fact that they don't have to have that profession. Next spell on our list is Shroud of Concealment, and it's not a spell, it's a fucking ability, I'm an idiot. But Shroud of Concealment, once again, an ability unique to just rogues that allows them to extend their stealth to all party and raid members within 30 yards for 15 seconds. Now, the key to Mythic Plus dungeons is completing them on time, and often there are certain trash pulls that are either overly difficult or overly time consuming that you'll want to skip in order to make sure that you make the dungeon on time. A good example of this is the bridge on Shrine of the Storm, or the entire first area all the way up to the first boss on Freehold. And that is a very useful ability. Yes, a similar effect can be achieved with invis pots, which I don't have any on this character because I'm a rogue, so why would I? Now that I realize that, I have them on my other characters. But the fact of the matter is that in Mythic Plus groups, specifically more so with pugs, the odds of you finding a group where everyone has invis pots are not going to be very likely unless you're running really high keys where people tend to be a little bit more prepared. And with that being said, they do have a 10-minute cooldown, so it can be helpful to have both Shroud of Concealment and invis pots in case you stealth past the group, you wipe, and then you need to stealth past the group again. With that being said, once again, rogues do have the advantage of being able to do it without the use of items, thus giving them a one step up above other melee DPS. And the next utility ability is Tricks of the Trade, which redirects all threat that you do onto your tank, or if you want to be an asshole, you can put it on someone else. But for the usefulness of it, you can redirect all your threat onto the tank over 6 seconds, and you can do that every 30 seconds. Now, this is incredibly useful in general, but specifically, it is immensely useful when it comes to the skittish affix in Mythic Plus dungeons, because that affix reduces the threat that tanks do by 75%. So rogues can directly counter this with Tricks of the Trade. And unfortunately, it is not a specific rogue-only ability because hunters have Misdirect, which allows them to do something very similar. Well, pretty much the exact same thing. But, however, they are one of only 2 melee DPS that can do this, which once again makes them valuable over most other melee DPS in this aspect. And they are also one of 2 melee DPS, with hunters also being the other one, that have the ability to completely drop their threat. Hunters have Feign Death, but unfortunately, once they move it, completely deactivates the effect of Feign Death. Well, not the threat drop, but they can be noticed again, whereas rogues have Vanish on a 2-minute cooldown that not only drops their threat, but puts them into stealth, so it's easier for them to maneuver around before they go back into the fight, or if it's a wipe, it prevents them from dying, which is always nice. Now, the big thing about these 4 abilities that I've mentioned is that they not only are utilities that help the group out, but they also help you out as a player by making it easier for you to get into Mythic Plus groups over other melee. Like if you're running a Tol Dagor group and you only have room for 1 melee and you see a rogue and then someone else that's not a rogue, you're probably going to pick the rogue. If you're wanting to get past certain areas with Shroud of Concealment, you're probably going to want a rogue. All these things are very helpful. Now, all those abilities that I've mentioned so far are pretty cool and pretty helpful, but that's not enough to push rogues over the edge. What really separates rogues and makes them incredibly strong are their defensive abilities. Now, before I go into the details of the rogue defensive abilities, I want to just address the fact that, yes, Divine Shield is technically the best defensive ability because it allows you to completely ignore all damage and basically be fucking invincible for 8 seconds, and there's nothing else that is that powerful. Nothing that blocks all damage for that long. But it's a 3.5-minute cooldown, and that's if you've got the 30% reduction from the talent, which if you do that, you don't have the mobility of a Cavalier. And as I mentioned earlier, Ret Paladins are already not very mobile, so you're probably going to want this talent, which means it's going to be a 5-minute cooldown. So it's very powerful, but you can't use it that often, and it's on Ret Paladins that just also happen to be not very mobile and not at the top of DPS in either single target or AoE, so they don't really have a lot of other options going for them that put them as better than rogues. So now that we've established that Pally Bubble is still OP as fuck, it's time to talk about the rogue's defensive abilities that keep him alive, and why they're so incredibly strong and make rogues essentially one of the best melee DPS in staying alive, and push them over the top to the best melee DPS in the entire game. The first ability I'm going to talk about is Feint. Now this is an ability that a lot of people, and even a lot of rogues, don't pay a lot of attention to. A lot of rogues probably don't even use it, because it is very specific in what it does. It avoids damage from area of effect abilities by 40%, and by avoids I mean reduces, for 5 seconds. So the duration is only 5 seconds, but it is 40%, but it's only from area of effect ability, so it's a very specific use. But there are 2 reasons why this ability is so goddamn good. You see, it has a 15-second cooldown, which means you can use it all the fucking time. And when it comes to damage you'll take in raids specifically, also in Mythic Plus, but mainly in raids, Feint has an immensely useful effect, because a lot of the damage you'll take as a DPS will either be damage over time that is easy for healers to react to, or burst damage from big AoE abilities. And being able to have a cooldown for that makes it a lot more likely that you'll survive and make your healer's job easier. I'll give you a few examples. In Uldir, the first raid boss of Talak has a couple of abilities that will do area damage. The first one being when he slams down his cudgel, and it's what you do to like get rid of the blood stuff on the ground. That's big area damage. You can use Feint there. If you're doing it on Mythic difficulty, there's also the Enlarged Heart, where everyone has to stack on the tank if they don't have the red circle to share the damage. Once again, AoE damage helps out. You can use Feint on that too. Then immediately on the next boss on Mother, every time someone runs through the door, that's AoE damage. Feint works for that too. Also, if you get caught in one of the swirlies on the ground, you can use Feint for that as well. It's just an incredible ability that you can use every single time there's an area damage that's coming out. And while it is very specific, the majority of the damage that you're going to be taking, that is going to be a situation where you might die and healers can't react too quickly, is area damage, making it easily the most impressive ability you have. Or at least that's what you might think. This brings me to our next incredibly strong defensive ability, Cloak of Shadows. Cloak of Shadows provides a moment of magic immunity, and it instantly removes all harmful spell effects. The cloak then, lingers and causes you to resist harmful spells for 5 seconds. So basically, it is a 2-minute cooldown. So not as bad as, say, Pally Bubble on a 5-minute cooldown, but it makes you immune to magic damage. Now, yes, it doesn't stop physical damage, but the majority of damage you will be taking as a DPS is going to be magic. Physical damage tends to be more reserved for what the tanks take, or damage over time effects that get applied to you. Big hits where you're going to need a cooldown are generally magic. Once again, I refer to Talak and Mother. Talak, pretty much all of his abilities that you're going to be taking damage from as a rogue are magic. But here is the kicker. Not only is it great for keeping you alive, but it allows you to fucking ignore mechanics. Example on Talak here. If you get the debuff where you start shitting little blood circles on the ground, as a normal melee, you have to, let's say he's right here. Normally, you'd have to run away from the boss, drop your pools on the side, and then run back once the debuff's done. So what this means is you've ran out, you're taking damage, you're making shit on the ground that other people are now going to have to avoid, and you're not doing damage because you had to run away from the boss. But if you're a rogue, the moment you get that debuff, you hit your Cloak of Shadows, it just removes it. You don't take any damage, you don't have to run out, no shit gets dropped on the ground. You ignore this fucking mechanic because you're a rogue, thus increasing your DPS, making it easier job on the healers, and less shit for the rest of the raid to have to dodge. You just helped everyone out. Or on the mythic version of Talek, where he has the circles where everyone has to spread out. If you're in a situation where your circle's overlapping with someone else, you can hit Cloak of Shadows. Not only make it so that your circle is not overlapping and potentially saving your life and the other guy's life, but now you can also go stack on the tank for the Enlarged Heart and help split the damage. But by help split the damage, you're not going to take any of the damage that would be your share because you still have Cloak of Shadows active. And because you're a rogue and depending on your spec, you can just shadow step right on top of the tank to do it super quick. Boom! That fight alone helps you out. Also, on Mother, once again, when you're crossing over the walls, that's magic damage. Use Cloak of Shadows, you don't take damage, which is incredibly helpful for going across the wall for you personally, but specifically on the mythic difficulty, where people are sharing health pools with the totem, if you're not taking damage, your health pool will help keep everyone else alive. So that helps not only you, but it helps the other people in your group that are sharing the Spirit Link totem with the Shaman. Once again, helping to ignore mechanics. Another way that you can be useful, say, in Mythic Plus, I'll just give you a couple of examples here. The King's Rest dungeon, first boss, when you get the debuff where you have to run out and drop the little pool at the background, instead of waiting for the whole debuff to tick down where you're consistently taking damage and having to stay away from the boss, you can run away quickly, hit Cloak of Shadows, drop it, not take damage, and run back onto the boss, saving the healer time from healing, giving you more time to attack the boss. Ataldazar, the last boss, when they throw those weird spiders that are running around, you can pop Cloak of Shadows and sprint at the same time, run around, run into a bunch of spiders to make it so that there's less of them running around, making it easier for you to be able to maneuver. It helps clear the floor, once again, helps ignore mechanics. This ability is so strong, so incredible, helps you stay alive, helps you ignore mechanics, helps your raid, helps yourself. But out of all these abilities, that still isn't the most incredible ability that rogues have. The most incredible and strong ability that rogues have for keeping themselves alive is cheat death. Fatal attacks instead reduce you to 7% of your maximum health, and for 3 seconds afterward, you take 85% reduced damage. Yes, it has a 6-minute cooldown, but that means pretty much every pull on a boss, you're gonna have cheat death active. Now, that may not seem like that big of a deal, because yes, you're still gonna take a lot of damage, but here is why it is so strong. Every other defensive ability you have to hit preemptively. You have to know you are going to take the damage and react on time. Cheat death is your get out of jail free, your oops, I fucked up a mechanic, I'm still alive thing. You can completely fuck up a mechanic, like example on Mother, once again, when I get to fucking raids because I'm an idiot. Mother, when the lasers are going across the room, if you didn't dodge because you were an idiot, guess what? You're still alive because of cheat death. It is the only ability in the game that keeps you alive reactively. You do not have to use it ahead of time. It keeps you alive reactively. So, plain and simple, if you are a rogue and you're in a raid, there are so many ways to keep yourself alive that if you die, it's probably gonna be because of a slow dot ticking over time and the healers just couldn't keep up. You can survive almost anything with Feint, Cloak of Shadows, and cheat death. And then after all that, you can still, heal yourself with a Crimson Vial. Or, well, not with every spec, but still. You have a lot of abilities, a lot of tools on a rogue to give you survivability and utility beyond that of any other melee DPS. by far. By far, it is unmatched. So, because you can stay alive and provide that extra utility, that is why rogues are the best melee DPS. You can do all the damage you want in the world, but if you're dead on the ground while the rogue is still alive, guess who's topping that DPS meter? You can do all the damage in the world, but if you're having to pull that extra trash pull because you don't have Shroud of Concealment or lockpicking, guess what? Rogue's still better. You can pull all the DPS in the world, but if you pull aggro because you don't have a rogue to do tricks of the trade and vanish, guess what? Rogue's still better. Doesn't matter how good you think you are as another DPS. The rogues are better. Their utilities are too good for Mythic Plus. Their survivability is too good for Mythic Plus and rating. Oh, and just an add little side bonus of Shroud of Concealment that I didn't mention. On the third boss, Fetid, when you're in the room trying to pull him, it can be a little bit annoying because he's padding around to get ideal positioning. So Shroud of Concealment makes it so that your regular can get into position without worrying about pulling the boss early. So you can still get your pre-pots off. Just a nice little added bonus there. So there you have it. That is why, without a doubt, with facts, I have proven that rogues are the best melee DPS. And you know what? If you disagree, that's fine. That's your opinion. But I didn't use an opinion here today. I proved it. And if you think you can prove me wrong, I encourage you to try and say something in the comments. Go for it. And if I like your idea, if I like your argument for why you think another class is a better melee DPS than rogue, then I might make a video out of it and give you credit for it. So leave a comment in the section below. Let me know if you agree, if you disagree, and if you disagree, what class do you think is the best? And prove to me why it's better than rogues. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like in the comment section below because that's how likes work. I'm a fucking idiot. Anyways, leave a comment. Let me know if you like it, if you want me to talk about something else, or if you like this style of video. Be sure to let me know. I'm planning on doing a lot more of them. Also, be sure to hit a subscribe if you haven't already. I'm going to be doing new World of Warcraft videos every 2 weeks. We're actually doing a little bit better than every 2 weeks so far with our uploads, but committing to one video every 2 weeks. So stay tuned for that. I'm Ian from Sleep Deprivation, dozing off. And I'll see you guys in the next video when I wake up.